All right, and we are live. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but thank you for everyone who's stuck around to watch the first ever competition prep Google Hangout for Pennsylvania DECA. We're really excited that you're able to join us today. If you don't know, my name is Donald LeCompte. I'm excited to be serving as your state president this year. So welcome to everyone again. This is a program that the state officer team has worked very hard to develop this year. When we first sat down at our summer training in June, we really came up with two main goals. We wanted to increase communication between chapters and the state officer team, and we wanted to see more competitive event results at ICDC. So one way we could mix these two things is by creating a program like this, where we can give you great tips, and other people, other panelists like we have tonight, can also give you great tips from their experiences in DECA. So just so you have an idea how this program is going to work long term, it's going to be the second Monday of every month, and it's going to be a different topic every month. Tonight it's choosing your competitive event. We're going to kind of work our way up. Future topics will have to do with written events, role plays, presenting to judges, much, much more. It'll be something different every month to help you prepare for your competition. So with that, I'll introduce tonight's panelists. First, we'll start with Alec Romero. He's DECA's executive president for the high school division. Victoria Babb is on here. She's a two-term state officer from Pennsylvania and now a very active student at the Smeal School of Business at Penn State. Keegan O'Brien, Mr. Keegan O'Brien, who's a former advisor from Appleton East High School in Wisconsin and is now serving as the leadership consultant for Wisconsin DECA. And trying to join the call right now is Mrs. Majors. Some of you may know her as the advisor from Freedom High School right here in Pennsylvania, and she's also serving as the president of our Board of Trustees. So before we begin, I just want to remind you all that at the end of this, we'll be having a question and answer session. So there are two different ways you could take part in that. I believe on your side of the screen you'll see a spot to type in questions that you might have for us. Anything having to do with competitive events, even if you just wanted to throw a general DECA question in there. We'd love to answer your questions. Also go ahead and tweet your questions using @PADECA. That's @PADECA. Tweet it at our Twitter account, and we would be happy to answer those questions for you at the end. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is hand it off to our executive president, Alec Romero, for some tips on choosing your competitive event. Take it away, Alec.
Thank you very much, Donald. So first off, what I really want to touch on is analyze what you've done in the past. What have you already had experience in? I had a friend, Ross. He was the Arizona state president for Arizona DECA, and his father owned his own restaurant. So Ross immediately took to the restaurant business, and he just flourished in that competitive event. He won it every year at the state level because he didn't just know it in the classroom, he knew it in the real world, which really helped for him to apply that to DECA. So I would say first look at what your real world experience has been already. And then the next one is, what do you want to do one day? Even if you're not good at it now, what do you want to be good at another day? Because you really need to work on that. For me personally, I always did hospitality, hotel lodging management, because that was just something I was good at. I was good at the whole customer service atmosphere and that aspect, dealing with those problem-solving situations. And so that's how I really chose mine. But I would say take with what do you know now and what do you want to be? What do you want to get better at? What do you want to improve on? What makes you comfortable? And I'd say those are the two really big ones for me personally when it comes to choosing your own event.
All right, thank you, Alec. I really like the real world experience part of that. That's a big piece that some DECA members don't understand. They might go into DECA not realizing that they already have experience in some of the different topics that we cover with our competitive event series. So translating that real world experience to your competitive event can be very helpful. Let's get another student perspective on things with Victoria Babb. Floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. I would think that a lot of there's going to be a common theme between all of our suggestions with that real world piece. But I would say that one of the things that's super important is, and as a high school student, I know this can be difficult, but it's really understanding who you are and what your strengths are. So if you're analytical, it's important to find a competitive event that will allow you to use that as a strong suit. So some of the more creative marketing events may not be the best fit for you if you've got an analytical brain that needs those numbers, concrete concepts. But if you are more creative, it can be really helpful for you to think quickly on your feet to come up with some more elaborate schemes or ideas for how to solve those problems. I know for me, I am not analytical. That's not how my brain works. I came into high school thinking I was going to be an accountant and quickly learned that I was going to hate it, and I would have hated my life and job had I stayed on that. And it's really just because my brain does not process information the way that an analytical person does. I'm much more abstract thinking. I latch on to more ambiguous concepts. And so for me, it was very easy to fall straight into business services marketing. It was much more people-facing. So the other thing with marketing too and creative can be that it's the type of marketing that you're doing. Are you talking to customers, or is your marketing plan having to go straight to B2C, or is it B2B? Whereas I knew that I was a little bit stronger B2B. I understood the business backgrounds a little bit based off of my part-time job that I had in high school, and which is bringing in some of that real-world experience that Alex said. So understanding that you're either creative or analytical, and sometimes you can be both. So it's really finding a balance of how your brain processes information, so you can be the most effective in that short amount of time that you have. So, yeah.
Great. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself there. Great, thank you very much. I really like that whole different approach on it, being analytical versus working with people. You really have to go with what your strong skill sets are. If you're someone who might want to work in an office one day, just sit behind a computer, doing like a hotel event might not be best for you. You might not have those personality skills. Same way the other way around. If you like working in a hotel, if you have strong personality, accounting might not be good for you. And that's something that you might not find out until you do that competitive event also. You might think that you want to do accounting, and then you do the competitive event and you say, wow, this is boring. I do not want to do this for the rest of my life. So there's really both aspects. Now let's hear from an advisor, someone who's had many students go on be successful in their competitive events, and maybe some of the programs that you used in your chapter back in Wisconsin. So Mr. O'Brien.
Well, thanks for having me. Great insight so far from the rest of the panel. When Donald asked me to speak on this, I went and looked up one of my articles I wrote for DECA Direct a couple of years ago. And first off, that's a great resource to any DECA member out there to find information on tons of topics. There's an article recently from a member about this very topic. I printed off my article that I wrote a couple of years ago, and I'll just highlight some of those things that I talked about in the article. The first thing I'd like to make clear to all the members out there, because I know that probably not just Pennsylvania is watching this, you really need to understand what your state or chartered association's guidelines and policies are in regards to what events you can compete in for your district, regional, state, chartered association conferences, because it can vary from what ICDC has. I know in Michigan, DECA, they have events that only take place at Michigan, and they don't move on to ICDC, or they might go to ICDC under the Thrive Academy or something. So really take a look at those guidelines. If you just go to the DECA website and look at all of the competitions there, some of those might not be offered at your district or regional competition. You could be let down. So the first resource is probably going to be your local chapter advisor, who can answer a lot of those questions. So after that, now you know what you can compete in. I would say if you're a first-time competitor and if you can compete in the principals events, those are really good events for first-time competitors, because typically you only have one role play, and they are very basic. They're much like a job interview, where you're just going to be answering questions about yourself and why you would fit the role of the person that they're trying to hire. Where Victoria was kind of talking about, you're presenting plans for advertising campaigns or solutions to problems. Those can be a little bit more complex. So those principals events are a great way, at least I think, for a first-time competitor to get their feet wet, find out a little bit about DECA, probably get hooked and want to compete for the next 4 years. The next thing I always would ask my students when I was a local chapter advisor is, do you have a job somewhere? Just like Alec talked about, Ross in Arizona, and he did have a job somewhere. So he had that practical real world experience. If a student tells me they work at McDonald's, I'm going to really push quick serve restaurant management. They're using a lot of the terminology at work. They have great resources there that can tell them about current industry trends. It seems like a no-brainer. If they're working at Macy's, I might say, what department do you work in? Oh, clothing, apparel, and accessories would be something that I would recommend. So that would be the easy way. That's what I would think. If you don't have a job, or maybe you had that job because it was an easy job to get, I would do like Alex said. Do something that you're interested in for the long term. Another thing to consider is, do you work better as an individual or as a team? And one thing that I see a lot of used to see a lot of my students do was just go into competition with their best friend. Where that might not always, you can see Victoria's reaction, that might not always work out the best. I have seen it work great in some situations, but most of the time, friends are friends, but business partners can be a little bit different. Really find somebody that you can rely on if you go the team route. And again, take a look at your state or chartered associations rules and guidelines in that regard. I can tell you from my personal experience, I think DECA has it set up so those team events are geared more towards the junior and senior level students. They're going to be longer case scenarios, more prep work. You're going to have to talk to somebody about the plan that you're going to present to your judge, or in the written project, same kind of way, in most cases. So really think about that aspect. And if you're doing this for the first time, you can do this alone. You will be fine. After you do one role play, every DECA member ever will tell you, that wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, and it won't be, and you'll be glad that you did it. That's the chapter advisor and me still talking. Another thing to do, ask your local chapter advisor or go to the DECA website. Check out some sample events in the different areas. Like when I first started as a chapter advisor, Victoria mentioned business services. I had no idea what an event might be like until I read one. And some of the time you're going to read one, like when I read the accounting applications events, I'm like, oh my God, I could never do this as a competitor. But then I read something like retail merchandising, and I think I could hit it out of the park. So once you read some of those and get an idea of what the competitions might be like, that will help. Also looking at practice tests related to that cluster. For me, the finance cluster would be very difficult. The marketing, that's more up my alleys. The final thing I talk about in the article is sometimes I'll talk to students and they can't answer any of those questions, and I just don't know, OB. Then I'll say, hey, you want to just play the number game? And I used to keep track how many students competed in certain events at districts, how many students competed in certain events at state. At ICDC, it's pretty much the same across the board, but they're not thinking about that when they're trying to figure out what competition to take part in. And when we're in Wisconsin, we're fighting for these spots at state. Like, it's not open game where we have 3,500 members at state. It's 1,000 and it's capped. So there's a limited number of competitors that are going to move on. So I'll have some students that say, oh, there's only 12 students in that event last year. I'll go for that one. Where others have like 60. So there you are totally just leaving it up to chance, because we don't know what competition numbers are going to look like the following year, but you can start to see some trends. But another thing is other advisors do the same thing. So you'll see, spikes in certain events, and it can backfire on you. My biggest thing is, if you don't have a job, just figure out what you think you do like, take a look at some of those sample competitions, and then go from there. So hope that helped.
Great, thank you very much. That was definitely a lot of really great insight. And one thing I want to follow up on, especially for a PA aspect, is the guidelines for each state and how they can be different. If you're competing in Pennsylvania, you might know that we do have some events that can't move on to ICDC. And I could remember one of them specifically. We have a written event that we have as a competition at our state conference, but doesn't move on to nationals. And the kid who placed first at states last year saw me at ICDC and pretty much was saying, how do we get this to become an ICDC event? I said, well, I don't know if we can make that happen, but you kind of needed to look into this ahead of time. They didn't realize that their event didn't allow them to compete at nationals. So they were really upset about it. They were bummed. So look into those kinds of things ahead of time. Also, if you're in PA, know that if you're competing in the fashion show and you place first, you're not necessarily going to be going on to ICDC. Some of those kinds of events that we have here, which are a little bit more unique, don't allow you to move on. They're great. They're a lot of fun when we're in Hershey, but they don't necessarily let you move on to that next level. So look into that for sure. I just want to share some of my experience as well. One key tip I could tell anyone who's starting. I know some people think when they join freshman year, or even if they just join sophomore or junior year, they think when they're picking their competitive event that first year, they need to stick with it all 4 years. You do not have to do that. You can find that your interests change from year to year. You can do different competitive events. That's exactly what I've done. The first year I joined DECA, I didn't end up joining until after the district competition. So I was pretty much confined to written events. I did a business operations research manual. Found out that is not what I wanted to do. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like the 30-page paper. So the next year I went and I did something different. Hotel lodging management. Right up my alley. I like working with people, the customer service aspect. I did well with it. Last year I said, you know what? Even though I was successful as a sophomore, I want to try something new again. DECA came out with the financial consulting event. And I said, hey, let's try it. I'm thinking of maybe majoring in finance or in economics. So if I want to test out my skills in this, I should do it now. And I happened to place first at States for trying a new event. And that also had a little bit to do with what Mr. O'Brien said, and looking into the numbers of how many people compete in it. When I competed in hotel lodging management, there were upwards of 50 kids in my event. Last year at States for financial consulting, there were about 15. So keep in mind those numbers of how many kids compete and how many kids move on from each event. We're really excited this year in PA. After another membership increase, we can now send 4 kids to ICDC from all of our competitive events. So that's really exciting for us. It used to be 4 in our role plays and only 3 in the written events, but that's something new for us this year. I actually just want to go back to Alec really quick. He has one point he wants to throw in here. Go ahead, Alec.
Thanks, Donald. Yeah, and one thing that Mr. O'Brien had touched on was, dealing with something either you know about or something you're comfortable with. And the thing is and kind of a point of view perspective to put on that is, it doesn't just have to be a job. Maybe a job you had or a family owner owned a business. It could be something that you're just involved in. So to give you an example, for myself, I would always get my teammates, as many of my teammates as I could every year, to come to the different DECA events that we had. They would all do sports marketing and entertainment, because that's something they were comfortable with. If you know about sports, then if you sit down in a role play and they say, hey, you're the general manager of a professional football team, you know what they're talking about. You know what your responsibilities are and what that position entails. Same with if you do work at a restaurant, like Mr. O'Brien said, McDonald's, or you've at least been to a McDonald's. You understand what a quick serve restaurant is because you go there. So it's not just about being an employee or an employer. It's also about just participating, being a consumer, being around that environment, and understanding, like Mr. O'Brien also said, the terminology and the different things that you're going to be talking about, and just being familiar with that atmosphere. But I just wanted to touch on that for those of you who may not feel like you have that professional involvement. It's not just that. It's just being involved in any type of way. Thanks, Donald.
No, thank you for adding that in. That's a key point. There are so many kids in high school that don't have the opportunity to work right now, don't have a job. So for all of those other students, that's really key to keep in mind. Now, before we get to the question and answer session, because there are a couple questions that we have here, I wanted to just read you some tips that were emailed to me by Mr. Shane Thomas. If you don't know who he is, he's the Director of Competitive Events for DECA Inc. So he had just a couple of brief tips, similar to some of them that we've said already. But it's about choosing the right competitive event for you. He said he strongly encourages students to stay within their career cluster. If a student is taking a finance or an accounting class right now in school, look at one of DECA's finance events or accounting events, one of those sorts of things. Vice versa with anything else that you might be doing. If you're in a sports marketing class, try one of the sports marketing events. Another thing that he also brought to mind here is if you enjoy simulations and gaming and those sorts of things, remember that DECA has a stock market game and virtual business challenges. A lot of people forget about those events, so not necessarily as many people sign up for them, not necessarily as competitive. Don't get me wrong; those kids, when they're going on the stock market game and the challenges at ICDC, man, I don't even want to go around that booth. Just, it's very hectic. They know what they're doing. They're in the zone. But if that's something you enjoy doing right now, try it out. Ask your advisor. Some advisors don't even know those programs exist. So talk to them about that and make sure that your advisors are aware of those different things. So now with the questions, what I'll kind of just do is I'll throw a question out, and just whoever wants to grab at it first, you could just unmute yourself so we can see here. So Mr. O'Brien, you kind of touched on this one already, but team versus partner events, kind of what's the difference? What different things can you expect? And how do you pick the right partner?
The team versus partner events. So picking the right partner, I think you're going to have to ask some uncomfortable questions. I've had teams that think going in that people will dedicate time to preparing beforehand, and they're just trusting that they're doing that on their own time. I think you're going to want to pick somebody that will make time to prepare with you for your competition, so you're both on the same page. And somebody, I mean, honestly, I would look at somebody who realistically has the time to put in the same amount of time that you plan on. If you're going to pick a 3-sport athlete who also has a job, who also volunteers at their church, I mean, maybe they're a rock star and they can do it all, but most of the time that person isn't going to be able to dedicate the same amount of time as you if you don't have all of those things going on. And also maybe in some cases a partner might help you out. So if you're not as comfortable taking on a role all by yourself where somebody can help you in those speaking situations, it might be a route that you want to go. I always say that practicing before competition is really going to help you, especially with a partner, to figure out what those transitions are going to look like. How are you going to manage that? It just looks really awkward if you start out a team role play, one person talks for 7 minutes, the next person talks for 7 minutes, then you have a minute of questions from the judge. That's not really teamwork, and I'm sure Donald will run another series about how to manage those team events, but those are all questions you have to have, not the night before competition, okay, or the morning on the bus ride there. And I've seen those things happen. Who's going to talk first? What's a performance indicator? And then I just want to cry myself to sleep. So think about those things ahead of time, okay?
Yeah, and I'll go. Oh.
No, go for it, Alec. You're the El Presidente.
No, ladies first. Ladies first.
I would just say, too, I mean, I know I've kind of harped on this a little bit, but understanding your strengths. So for me, I knew that I was going to be the one to talk the whole time. So I knew that my personality would kind of bulldoze somebody else if I had another partner. And so for me, and I wasn't sure I could trust somebody else to pick up the slack. And so if you know that you're that personality type, then you may want to just go straight individual. If you're not sure and you know that, like, hey, I'm not as good with talking to people, it may be good for you to find somebody that's going to talk a little bit more. But it's understanding that your strengths and knowing that anybody out there, you can succeed as an individual or a team. A teammate shouldn't be a crutch. It should be a help to you. So you're both feeding off of each other. It's not that one's more stronger than the other, because then you have a tendency to overshadow the one that's not as strong. But it should be a pairing that makes sense to be able to be balanced in that. Go ahead, Alec.
Thanks. Yeah, and I mean, one thing I want to say is what Mr. O'Brien said, definitely take that into serious consideration when not only picking your team event for role play, but written events. Because that's something, I don't think we've talked enough about, but when it comes down to your written events, I've seen so many teams, because those things should start out months and months ahead. It takes a lot of preparation, a lot of work to write down your different business ideas. And I've seen so many teams just, crash and burn the last 2 weeks because all of a sudden you realize you haven't done anything, or one person has written all of their work and the other person has 15 pages they were supposed to write and they never got done with it. So you have to make sure that you're keeping tabs on each other and that you're working really hard. Another thing is it's a lot of chemistry. So what I want to say is if you want to do a 2-person team, but maybe you go into your first competition and it doesn't work out well and you are speaking over each other, give it some time. The best teams I've ever seen are the ones who have done it all 4 years in high school, or the ones who have done it at least this year, last year, the ones who have been to events, because you have to work those kinks out and you have to work at it to be better, and you build chemistry when you do that. You don't always want to go with your best friend who you would have a lot of chemistry with to start, but that's why you build it with somebody else, and next thing you know, you guys are business partners in real life. So just keep it going and keep working at it. But that's really my biggest advice when it comes to the team events. Oh, we lost Donald. Well, this is interesting.
Are we able to see the questions?
I don't think we are. All right. Well, ad-lib. Also, virtual business events, like Donald had touched on earlier, make sure to check those out. Those are going to be getting really competitive. They've been picking up every single year, and we're looking for a really big return this year. Another one, too, that we're introducing is a hotel lodging event. So I'm sure you all are going to be very excited for that one. It's definitely a very popular role play. So to be able to compete on that in the virtual business simulator should be pretty exciting. And again, if you're in sports, I mean, you'll love the virtual business sports simulator. I know I loved it, getting to be a general manager of a team. It's a really cool thing. And just because Donald's not here, so fun fact, also for the virtual business, if you didn't already know, if you compete in sports, because usually it's the simulator, but you're limited to only certain areas that you get to control. Well, what I was told is that in ICDC, if you make it to the finals, you're given full control over the entire team. And the thing is you're all put into one league. And so you're competing with other teams within one league. So if it's like that again this year, I mean, if you're a competitor, that's going to be pretty crazy, just like Donald talked about the stock market game. So should be pretty interesting.
I would say too, I'm big on entrepreneurship. That's what I do at Penn State. So think about there's a lot of opportunity, especially at Penn State and other universities, to really develop a business while in school. It's definitely very feasible to do school and have a startup. So if you've got an idea for something, you might as well spend the time to flesh it out while in high school, and then also get the opportunity to compete and win based off of your idea. And then who knows, that could help pay your tuition, because it's expensive, let me tell you. And so I would think about those events as well. Some of those are 11-page papers, as I think I'm still correct in that. You can correct me if I'm wrong. So they're shorter papers, but ultimately can benefit you directly in the future, because it's something that you could go on to also create. And our man's back.
All right. Yeah, I'm very sorry about that. I'm really not sure what happened. I just kind of got kicked out of the Hangout there. So I had to join. Thank you so much for filling in. But that was actually the last question I had there, except for one other one that I just wanted to throw in, and you might have just covered this. If not, if we could just do this, that would be great. Just one general tip that you would give anyone going into a competitive event. Just the one tip you would give someone. What would it be?
I would say don't be nervous. And the thing is, and this is going to sound really funny, but don't be nervous about being nervous. It's fine to be nervous. That means you care. For me personally, my first role play my freshman year, I scored a 75, I believe. And I mean, I was shaking, I was stuttering, I was sweating. My judge finally told me to calm down and take it easy. He could tell I was a freshman, I was new to it. And the thing is too, when you do mess up, they'll give you feedback. And that's exactly what he did. He told me what I did right, what I did wrong. After that role play, I don't think I've ever gone under a 90 since that role play. Okay, and so if it's your first time doing a role play, don't be afraid. Okay, and if you are afraid, don't be afraid to be afraid. Okay, things happen, and you got to get those pregame jitters out. All right, it's not always easy, but again, you have to work at it. And so don't just quit and think that this isn't you and you can't speak. No, you just have to work on it. You have to get comfortable in your scenario. And the amazing part is, once you get comfortable in a role play in DECA, you'll be comfortable in every other speaking situation of your life. Okay? Whenever I have a big speaking situation or I have an interview, I always tell myself it's just a role play. And that calms me down completely. Okay, so just give it your all, keep going, and keep getting better.
All right, I can jump in. That was great. I would say that that works for a lot of presentation situations. I'll be really specific to DECA, to people that are competing. If you're already making the choice to compete, you're like most DECA members, you're probably outgoing. You're probably the person that walks into a room full of people and is willing to talk to a lot of different groups of people. You have that outgoing personality, most likely. And when you go to your DECA competitions, you're going to meet a lot of kids just like you. So most people that do well in competition, their role plays are pretty, it comes natural, okay? So usually, once you start to become pretty fluid in that, you'll get in the 90s, like Alex said. So the way to set yourself apart in almost every competition that DECA has is through the written test. And it's a thing that those outgoing, awesome personalities might not always want to take the time to actually prepare for. Taking tests, practice tests especially, is not exciting. But it is a great way to pick up on the terminology that you'll actually end up using in your role plays. So it's going to help you in that area too. And as you take the test, and I'm sure everyone on the panel has heard this before or has experienced it, as you take these tests over and over and over again, you're going to start to notice that questions get recycled from year to year to year, where they're asked in a way that one of the other choices becomes the answer. So if you talk to your local chapter advisor, you go to the DECA website, you can, or the Shop DECA Images website, you can order previous tests from previous years and just start taking those and take them over and over and over again. That was something that we implemented in my chapter last year at Appleton East, where we had sessions at school where kids came in and all they did was take tests. And of course, they complained about it, but the results were shown when it came to competition for the kids that took it seriously. I can tell you a girl from Appleton North, Rachel Brosman, got a 97 out of 100 on a test. In DECA, that's just unheard of. And she placed top 10 in the world because of it, okay? She's always good at the role plays. But when I saw her 97, I mean, my mouth just about hit the floor. I'm like, that's like Ontario creeping into Wisconsin here. They are all, you hear their name over and over and over again at competition because they take the time to prepare for those tests. So please, if you're a member, if you're watching something like this, I think you're probably taking the time to really put in some effort, study the test.
And I think just to follow up on that, that differentiating piece, to know what's actually going on in the world of, like if you're a marketing major, to know what the latest kind of trends in marketing are, or consumer behavior trends, or even in the financial space, to understand where like the price of oil is, to understand some of the general Dow information, to be able to connect DECA to the real world only shows the judge that you've spent time to look at something outside of just the role players, the provided material. I know there was a lot of times where I would have no idea what to talk about, but then remember that I had read an article about some new trend or some new method for how to advertise on Facebook or whatever it was. And to have that kind of outside knowledge, and then it's not just your own, you coming up with something, but you've got facts to back up what you're saying, helps in a lot of ways too. But Mr. O'Brien's completely right that a lot of people are good at role plays, so to be able to have something that stands out is really important.
Great. And then the one tip I would have, it kind of tags along with Alex a little bit. It's just to be yourself. Whenever you're presenting, you're in role plays, anything like that. Just be your own self. Be your personality. You might sit down to a role play that says at the top, "You are the CEO of blah 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 company." Don't feel that just because you're acting as the CEO, you need to be all serious and this and that, and just change your entire demeanor. Play to your strengths. If you're funny, use some humor in your role play. Try to use some humor with your judge. If you are serious, that could play to your advantage as well, because sometimes CEOs are seen as being serious people. So just whatever your personality is, use it to your advantage. Don't try to act as if you're somebody else when you're in your presentation or in your role play. It'll really help you out. You'll see the difference in your scores for sure. So with that, I want to thank our three panelists that were able to join us tonight. Really, really appreciate your willingness to come on here, even two of you not being from Pennsylvania, so it's much appreciated. But I know we had some people watching from other places as well. All of your input was just phenomenal, and I'm sure everybody was able to take a lot away from this. I also want to apologize for all the technical difficulties, the late start, my getting kicked off here just a little while ago. I can definitely say that after doing this one, I won't be hosting any more each year. It'll be different state officers each month. But at our next meetings, we will definitely be going over the do's and don'ts of running this program, and we'll make sure everything goes more smoothly from here on out. So with that, good night, everybody. Thank you.